The air, hectic with bugs, smells of burned circuitry and scorched metal. The wreckage is still a few hundred yards off in the distant pines. The faint crackle of fire can be heard, barely audible above the wind rustling in the treetops. Off to the right, maybe 20 yards ahead of Lily, Martinez has taken the lead, weaving through the undergrowth, slicing through foliage with his bowie knife. On a parallel path to the left, Gus trudges along, his hound dog eyes surveying the shadows for biters, his machete on his shoulder. The sky is barely visible above him, blocked by skeins of tree limbs and vines. Lily starts to say something else when a figure appears in front of Gus. Lily halts, her gun coming up fast, her breath seizing up in her throat. She sees Gus raise the machete. The large male walker, clad in tattered overalls, has its back turned to him, teetering on dead legs, its head cocked toward the crash site like a dog hearing an ultrasonic whistle. Gus sneaks up behind it. The machete comes down fast, the blade making a crunching noise as it embeds itself in the grisly dura of the walker's cranium. Fluids gush, making watery sluicing noises in the silence of the woods as the walker collapses. Lily hardly has a chance to breathe again when another noise draws her attention to the right. 15 feet away, Martinez lashes out at another stray walker, a spindly female with gray hair matted like spiderwebs, probably a former farmer's wife skulking around the brush. His knife impales the back of her head above the neck cords, putting her down with the speed of a silent embolism. She never saw it coming. Letting out an involuntary sigh of relief, lowering her pistol, Lily realizes that the walkers are currently mesmerized by the sights and sounds of the crash. Martinez pauses to glance over his shoulder at the others. "Everybody good?" he says in a low voice, almost a stage whisper. Nods from everyone. And then they're moving again, slowly but steadily forward, into the denser trees and fog-bound shadows. Martinez motions for them to hurry up. The ground is spongy and soggy beneath their feet, slowing them down. The shadows close in, the odors of scorched metal and burning fuel engulfing them, the crackling noises rising. Lily feels nauseous, her skin prickling with nerves. She senses Austin's eyes on her. "Do you think maybe you could stop staring at me?" "It's not my fault you're so hot," he says with that same nervous smirk. She shakes her head in dismay. "Can you just try and focus?" "I am totally focused. Believe me," he says, still gripping his gun with that fake cop show grip as they continue on. Less than 100 yards from the crash site, they come to a washout, a bug-infested swampy clearing blocking their path, the bog crisscrossed by enormous deadfall logs. With silent hand motions, Martinez directs them to use the logs as bridges. Gus goes first, crabbing across the largest deadfall. Martinez follows. Lily goes next, and Austin brings up the rear. As he reaches the other side, Austin feels a tugging sensation on his jeans. The others have already crossed and are now trudging toward the clearing. Austin pauses. At first he thinks he's caught on a piece of bark, but then he looks down. Decomposing hands rise out of the marsh, clawing at his pants leg. He lets out a cry and fumbles with his gun as dead fingers clutch at him, pulling him downward. Rising out of the mire, the slimy top half of a moldering creature goes for his legs. Filmed in black gunk, its hairless skull unidentifiable as man or woman, its eyes as white and opaque as light bulbs, it snaps its black turtle-like mouth on the creaky hinges of a ruined jaw. Austin gets off a single muffled gunshot, the silencer spitting sparks, but the bullet misses its mark. The blast grazes the top of the swamp biter's head and then plunks harmlessly into the swamp. 50 feet away, Lily hears the blast. She spins around, reaching for her guns, but her legs tangle and she slips on the mud. She sprawls to the weeds, the guns flying out of her hands. Austin tries to get a second shot off, but the swamp biter is going for his leg. It rises out of the mire like a slimy black whale, its jaws unhinging and emitting a noxious growl. Austin jerks back involuntarily, a high-pitched cry blurting out of him, and the gun slips out of his hand. He kicks at the creature's mouth, the toe of his boot getting caught in the mouthful of rotting black teeth and putrid drool. The swamp biter clamps down. Lily crawls toward her guns. Martinez and Gus, by this point, have both whirled toward the commotion, but it's too late to intercede. The giant dripping biter is about to chew through Austin's Timberland hiking boot, and Austin is fumbling madly for something in his pocket. Finally, Austin gets his hand around the road flare. At the last possible instant, before the swamp biter is able to break the skin of Austin's foot, the young man sparks the flare and rams it into the biter's left eye. The creature rears back suddenly, releasing its hold and tossing its ragged head back in a fountain of sparks. Austin stares for a moment, mesmerized by the sight of flames inside the rotten cavity of the biter's skull. The left eye glows for one horrible instant, shining with the intensity of a caution light. The biter stiffens in the muck. The back of its head suddenly bursts, spewing flames like the nozzle of a welding torch. The left eye pops like a bulb overloading, spitting hot tissue on Austin, and then the creature sinks into the black void. Austin shudders, wiping his face and watching for a moment, hypnotized by the spectacle of the biter sinking back into oblivion, until the only thing that remains are bubbles floating on the surface of the swamp and a dull flickering glow under the muck. Eventually, Austin manages to tear his gaze away. He finds his gun and catches his breath. "Nicely done," Lily says, with a grudging softness in her voice as she makes her way across the log bridge. "Here, give me your hand." She helps Austin to his feet, holding him steady on the slime-slick log. He gets his breath back, swallows the shock, and shoves his gun back in his belt. He looks into her eyes. "That was close." He manages a shaky grin. "That thing could have easily gotten you." "Yeah. Thank God you were around," she says, a smile on her lips now despite the beating of her heart. "Lily!" The booming voice of Martinez intrudes on the moment, drawing Lily's attention back over her shoulder. 30 yards away, through a break in the trees, in a pall of acrid black smoke, Martinez and Gus have found the crash site. "Come on, pretty boy," Lily says, gritting her teeth with nervous tension. "We got work to do." The chopper lies on its side in a dry creek bed, spewing smoke from its breached fuel tank. No victims in sight. Lily approaches cautiously, coughing, waving the fumes from her face. She sees Martinez approaching the cockpit, crouching down low, holding his hand over his mouth. "Be careful!" Lily pulls her guns as she hollers at Martinez. "You don't know what's in there!" Martinez touches the hatch release and burns himself, jerking his hand back. "Son of a bitch!" Lily edges closer. The smoke, already clearing, begins to part like a curtain to reveal the soft, scorched ground around the crash site. It dawns on Lily that the pilot must have aimed for the soft ground of the stream bed, the surrounding leaf-matted earth now torn up by the violence of the crash. The main rotor, detached and lying on the ground 20 feet away, looks as though it's tied in a knot. "Gus, Austin! Keep your eyes on the periphery!" Martinez indicates the adjacent wall of white pines higher up the bank. "Noise is gonna draw a swarm!" Gus and Austin whirl toward the woods and raise their muzzles at the darkness behind the trees. Lily feels the heat on her face as she approaches the wreckage. The fuselage lies on its right side, the tail fin and rear rotor horribly bent. One skid is torn off as though from the force of a giant can opener. The canopy and hatch windows are cracked and either steamed up from hyperventilating passengers or clouded over from the smoke. Regardless of the causes, though, it's impossible to see inside the cockpit. The soot has covered most of the markings on the bulwark and chassis, but Lily sees a series of letters along the tail boom. She sees a W and maybe an R, and that's about it. Martinez raises his hand suddenly as the noise of the fire dies down enough for them to hear the muffled cries coming from inside the cockpit. Martinez duck-walks closer. Lily moves in with her Rugers up, cocked and ready to rock. "Just be careful." Martinez takes a deep breath, and then climbs onto the side of the fuselage. Lily moves closer, aiming her twin .22s at the hatch. Balancing on the battered steel frame, Martinez pulls his bandana off and wraps it around the release handle. Lily hears a high-pitched voice. "Out of here!" Martinez yanks. The door snaps, squeaking open on shrieking hinges, releasing a puff of smoke and the tattered form of a frantic woman. Clad in a torn-down jacket and scarf, stippled in blood, She bursts out of the cockpit coughing and screaming. "Get me out of here!" Lily lowers her guns, realizing that the woman is not yet turned. Martinez pulls the victim out of the death trap. The woman writhes in his arms, her bloodless face a mask of agony. One of her legs is badly burned, the fabric of her jeans blackened to a crisp, glistening with pus and blood. She holds her left arm against her tummy, the fracture at the elbow bulging through the sleeve of her sweater. "Give me a hand, Lily." They carry the woman away from the wreckage and lower her to the ground. She looks to be in her late 30s, maybe early 40s. Fair-skinned, dishwater blonde hair, squirming in pain, her face wet with tears. She babbles hysterically. "You don't understand. We have to—" "It's okay. It's all right," Lily says to her, gently brushing her damp hair from her face. "We can help you. We have a doctor not far from here." "Mike! He's still—" Her eyelids flutter, her body spasming from the pain, her eyes rolling back in her head from the shock. "We can't leave. We have to get him out. We have to." Lily touches her cheek. The flesh is clammy and slimy as an oyster. "Try to stay calm. We have to bury him. It's something before he—" The woman's head lolls to the side, and she sinks into unconsciousness with the suddenness of a candle flame snuffing out. Lily looks up at Martinez. "The pilot," Martinez utters, meeting Lily's gaze with a hard look. By now the smoke is cleared and the heat has dwindled, and both Gus and Austin have returned to gaze over their shoulders. Martinez rises to his feet, and he goes back to the wreck. Lily follows. They climb up onto one of the mangled skids and boost themselves up enough to see into the open hatchway. The odor of charred meat assaults their senses as they gaze inside. The pilot is dead. In the hazy, sparking enclosure, the man named Mike sits slumped in his scorched leather bomber jacket, still harnessed to his seat, the entire left side of his body blackened and disfigured from the in-flight fire. The fingers of one gloved hand have melted and fused to the control stick, and just for an instant, staring into that hellish cockpit, Lily gets the feeling this guy was a hero. He brought the craft down in the spongy cleavage of the creek, saving the life of his passenger, his wife, his girlfriend. "Too late to do anything for this guy," Martinez murmurs next to her. "Obviously," she says, lowering herself back to the ground. She glances across the clearing where Austin now kneels by the unconscious woman, feeling her neck for a pulse. Gus nervously keeps an eye on the woods. Lily wipes her face. "But we should probably honor her request, right?" Martinez climbs down and looks around the clearing, the smoke wafting away on the wind. He wipes his eyes. "I don't know." "Boss!" Gus calls out from the edge of the woods. Troubling sounds from the surrounding forest drift on the wind. "We ought to be thinking about getting the hell out of here pretty soon." "We're coming." Martinez turns to Lily. "We'll take the woman back." "But what about—" Martinez lowers his voice. "You know what the governor's gonna do with this guy, right?" Lily's spine tingles with rage. "This doesn't have anything to do with the governor. Lily, this guy saved this woman's life. Listen to me. We're gonna have a hell of a time just getting her back through these woods." Lily lets out an anguished sigh. "And you don't think the governor's gonna find out we left the pilot?" Martinez turns away from her and spits angrily. Wipes his mouth. Thinks it over. "Boss!" Gus calls out again, sounding exceedingly nervous. "I said we're coming, goddammit!" Martinez stares at the scorched ground, thinking and agonizing, until the whole issue becomes a foregone conclusion. Chapter 6. They get back to the truck just as the sun is starting to set, the shadows of the forest lengthening around them. Exhausted from the trip back through the hollow, where they encountered an increasing number of walkers, they enlist the help of David and Barbara in order to drag the bodies, each one tied to a makeshift stretcher of birch logs and willow switches, quickly toward the truck's rear hatch. They lift them one at a time into the crowded cargo bay. "Be careful with her," Lily cautions as David and Barbara shove the stretcher bearing the woman between two stacks of food crates. The woman is slowly coming back around, her head lolling back and forth, her eyes fluttering. There's not much room for extra bodies in the truck. and Barbara has to hastily rearrange the boxes and stacks of cartons in order to make space. She's hurt pretty bad, but she's hanging in there, Lily adds as she climbs up into the cargo hold. Wish I could say the same for the pilot. All heads turn toward the rear hatch as Gus and Martinez lift the dead pilot, his disfigured remains still strapped to the gurney, up and into the back of the truck. David has to make room for the corpse by shoving a stack of canned peaches against one wall and clearing a narrow strip of corrugated floor between a tower of hamburger helper cartons and a half-dozen propane tanks. David wipes his arthritic hands on his chambray shirt as he gazes down at the scorched remains of the pilot. This presents somewhat of a dilemma. Lily glances over her shoulder at the open hatch as Martinez peers into the shadowy chamber. We need to bury him. It's a long story. David stares at the cadaver. What if he... Keep an eye on him, Martinez orders. If he turns on the way back, use a small caliber round on him. We promised the lady we'd not gonna make it! The sudden outburst yanks Lily's attention back to the woman, who writhes on the iron floor still cocooned in willow branches, her blood-stained head drooping back and forth. Her feverish eyes are wide open, her gaze pinned to the truck ceiling. Her mutterings come fitfully, as though she's talking in her sleep. Mike was south of there. What about the tower? Lily kneels next to the woman. It's okay, honey. You're safe now. Barbara goes to the opposite corner of the hold and quickly rips the protective lid off a gallon of filtered water. She returns to the injured woman with the jug. Here, sweetheart. Take a sip. The woman on the stretcher cringes at a wave of pain that ripples through her as the water dribbles into her mouth. She coughs and tries to speak. Mike! Is he... Shit! Austin's voice rings out from the rear as he struggles to climb into the truck. Shooting nervous glances over his shoulder, he sees a pack of walkers lurching out of the woods, about 20 yards away and closing. At least 10 of them, all large males, their hungry mouths working busily as they approach. Their milky eyes gleam in the dusky light. Austin climbs on board with his gun still gripped in his sweaty hand. Get the fuck out of here! The slamming of the cab doors makes everybody jump. Gears grind. The chassis shudders and vibrates beneath them. Lily holds onto the crates as the truck heaves into reverse in a whirlwind of fumes and dust. Through the flapping rear tarp, Lily sees the walkers looming. The truck barrels directly into the dead, knocking them over like bowling pins, making wet thuds beneath the massive wheels. The truck bumps over them as the engine whines noisily, and the tires spin for a moment in the grease of rotten organs. The wheels gain purchase on the pavement. Gus slams it into drive, and the truck rumbles out of there, fishtailing down the 2-lane in the direction they had come. Lily looks back down at the woman with the dishwater hair. Just hang in there, sweetie. You're gonna be okay. Gonna get you to a doctor. Barbara tips more water across the woman's chapped, burned lips. Lily kneels closer. My name's Lily, and this is Barbara. Can you tell me your name? The woman utters something inaudible, her voice drowned out by the roar of the truck. Lily leans closer. Say it again, honey. Tell me your name. Christina, the woman manages through clenched teeth. Christina, don't worry, everything's gonna be okay. You're gonna make it. Lily strokes the woman's sweat-damp brow. Shivering, twitching on the stretcher, the woman takes shallow, quick breaths. Her eyes close to half-mast, her lips moving, forming a silent, pained litany that nobody can hear. Lily smooths her matted hair. Everything's gonna be okay, Lily keeps muttering, more to herself than to the victim. The truck rumbles down the 2-lane, the rear flaps snapping in the wind. Lily glances out the back and sees the tall pines outside passing in a blur. The setting sun behind the treetops causes a strobe-like effect that is almost hypnotic. Lily wonders for a brief moment if everything will indeed be okay. Maybe Woodbury is stabilized now. Maybe the governor's Machiavellian methods will actually keep them safe. Keep a lid on the place. She wants to believe in Woodbury. Maybe that's the key. Simply believing. Maybe that alone will get them through. Maybe. Where am I? The voice is hoarse, choked, unsteady. Dr. Stevens stands over the bed in his shop-worn lab coat and wire-rimmed glasses, gazing down at the woman from the chopper. "Gonna be a little groggy for a while," he says to her. "We gave you a couple of happy pills." The woman named Christina lies in a supine position on a makeshift gurney in the cinder block-lined catacombs beneath the racetrack. Clad in a cast-off terry cloth robe, her right arm wrapped in an improvised cast of kindling and medical tape, she turns her pale, ashen face away from the harsh halogen light shining down on her. "Hold this, Alice. Just for a second." Stevens hands the plastic vial of IV fluids to the young nurse. Also in a tattered lab coat, her hair pulled back in a ponytail, Alice forces a smile as she holds the vial aloft, its line connected to a stick in the injured woman's arm. Again, Christina manages to croak, "Where am I?" Stevens goes to an adjacent sink, washes his hands and towels off. "I could level with you and say the ninth circle of hell, but I'll refrain from the editorial comment for the moment." He turns back to her and says with a warm but slightly cynical smile, "You're in the sprawling metropolis of Woodbury, Georgia. Population who the hell knows. My name is Dr. Stevens, and this is Alice, and it's 7:15, and I understand you were fished out of the wreckage of a helicopter this afternoon?" She manages a nod, and then flinches at a twinge in her midsection. "That's going to be a little tender for a while," Stevens says, wiping his hands on the towel. "You had third-degree burns over 20% of your body. Good news is I don't think you'll need any skin grafts, just a little edema we're treating intravenously. Lucky for you, we had 3 liters of glucose left, which you're sucking down like a drunken sailor. You managed to fracture your arm in 2 places. We'll watch that as well. They said your name is Christina?" She nods. Stephen clicks a pen light, reaches down and checks her eyes. "How's your short-term memory, Christina?" She inhales an excruciating breath, which whistles softly in her throat. "Memory's fine. My pilot, Mike is his name. Was his name. Did they—" Stevens puts his pen light back into his pocket and gets serious. "I'm sorry to say your friend died in the crash." Christina manages a nod. "I'm aware of that. But I just wondered, his body, did they bring him back?" As a matter of fact, they did. She swallows thickly, licks her dry lips. "It's good, because I promised him a Christian burial." Stevens looks at the floor. "That's very admirable. A Christian burial." Stevens and Alice exchange a glance. Stevens looks back at the patient and smiles. "One step at a time, okay? For now, let's just concentrate on getting you up and running." "What's the matter? Did I say something wrong?" Stevens ponders the injured woman. "It's nothing. Don't worry about it." "Is there a problem with me wanting to give my pilot a proper burial?" Stevens sighs. "Look, I'll be honest with you. I don't think that's going to happen." Christina lets out a grunt as she struggles to a sitting position. Alice helps her sit up, gently keeping her arm elevated. Christina looks at Stevens. "What the hell is the problem?" Stevens looks at Alice, then back at the patient. "The governor is the problem." "Who?" "Guy who runs this place." Stevens takes off his glasses, pulls out a handkerchief, and cleans the lenses carefully as he speaks. "Fancies himself a civil servant, I guess. Hence the name." Christina furrows her brow, confused. "Is this guy—" She searches for the words. Is he what?" She shrugs. "Is he, what would you call it, elected? Is he an elected official?" The doctor shoots another loaded glance at Alice. Wow. That's an interesting question." Alice grumbles. "He's elected, all right. By a single vote. His own." The doctor rubs his eyes. "It's a little more complicated than that." He measures his words. "You're new here. This man, he's the alpha dog here in our little kennel. He leads by default. Keeps order by doing the dirty work. A thin smile crosses Stevens's narrow features. The smile drips with disdain. Only problem is the man has developed a taste for it. Christina stares at the doctor. I don't know what that means. Look. Stevens puts his glasses back on and wearily runs his fingers through his hair. Whatever happens to your friend's remains, take my advice. Grieve on your own. Pay tribute silently. I don't understand. Stevens looks at Alice, his smile fading. He looks into Christina's eyes. You're gonna be okay. A week or so, when your arm's healed up. You might think about leaving this place. But I don't— And one other thing. Stevens fixes her with his gaze. His voice drops an octave, gets very serious. This man, the governor, he is not to be trusted, you understand? He is capable of anything. So just steer clear of him and bide your time until you can get out of here. Do you understand what I'm saying? She doesn't answer, just stares at him, soaking it in. Darkness closes in around the town. Some of the windows begin to glow with lantern light, others already pulsing with the unpredictable current of generators. At night, Woodbury has the surreal, retrofitted feel of the 21st century transported to the 19th, an atmosphere that has become de rigueur among most post-plague settlements. At one corner, torch flames bathe a boarded, desecrated McDonald's, the yellow-orange light reflecting off the ruins of its crumbling golden arches. Martinez's men, posted on cherry pickers at key junctures of the barricade, now begin to deal with an increasing number of moving shadows on the edges of the adjacent woods. Walker traffic has picked up slightly since the return of the reconnaissance party, and now 50 caliber placements on the north and west sides crackle with intermittent gunfire. It gives the little town, which now basks in the purple, hazy twilight of dusk, a war zone feel. Trundling past a portico of storefronts, carrying a peach crate brimming with provisions, Lily Call heads for her building. She hears the spit of automatic weaponry behind her, echoing across the windswept street. She pauses and glances over her shoulder at the sound of a voice rising over the gunfire. Lily! Wait up! In the strobe-like volleys of tracer bullets arcing across the sky, the silhouette of a young man in leather and flowing dark curls lopes toward Lily. Austin has a duffel bag heavy with supplies over his shoulder. He lives half a block west of Lily's place. He comes up with a big expectant grin on his face. Let me help you with that. It's okay, Austin. I got it, she says as he tries to take the crate from her. For an awkward moment, they play push-pull with the crate. Finally, Lily gives up. All right, take it. Now Austin happily walks alongside her with the crate in his arms. That was quite an adrenaline rush today, was it not? Easy, Austin. Pace yourself. They walk toward Lily's building. In the distance, an armed man paces along a row of semi-trailers at the end of the street. Austin gives Lily that same provocative little grin he's been plying her with for weeks. Guess we tasted the camaraderie of the battlefield together, huh? Kind of bonded out there, didn't we? Austin, can you please give it a rest? I'm wearing you down, though, aren't I? Lily shakes her head and lets out a little laugh to spite her nerves. You are relentless, I'll give you that. What are you doing tonight? Are you asking me out? There's a fight in the arena. Why don't you let me take you to it? I'll bring those Twizzlers I found today. Lily's smile fades. Not a big fan. Of what, Twizzlers? Very funny. Those fights are barbaric. I'd rather eat broken glass. Austin shrugs. If you say so. His eyes glint with an idea. How about this? Instead of a date, why don't you give me some more pointers sometime? Pointers on what? On dealing with the dead. All at once, he gets a solemn expression on his face. I'll be honest with you. Since all this shit started up, I've kinda hidden out with big groups. Never really had to fend for myself. I've got a lot to learn. I'm not like you. She gives him a glance as they walk. What do you mean by that? You're a badass, Lily. You got that cold, calculating Clint Eastwood thing going on. They reach the parkway in front of Lily's apartment building, now draped in shadow, the dead kudzu vines on the red brick exterior looking like a cancerous growth in the waning light. Lily pauses, turns to Austin and says, Thanks for the help, Austin. I'll take it from here. She takes the crate and looks at him. One thing, though. She licks her lips and feels a twinge of emotion pinching her insides. I wasn't always like this. You should have seen me back at the beginning. Scared of my own shadow. But someone helped me when I needed it. And they didn't have to. Believe me. But they did. They helped me. Austin doesn't say anything. Just nods his head and waits for her to finish her thought, because it looks as though something is eating at her. Something important. I'll show you some things, she says at last. And by the way, this is the only way we're going to survive. By helping each other. Austin smiles. And for the first time since Lily has known him, it's a warm, sincere, guileless smile. I appreciate it, Lily. I'm sorry I've been such a dick. You haven't been a dick, she says. And then, without warning, she leans over the crate and gives him a platonic little kiss on the cheek. You're just young. She turns and goes inside, gently shutting the door in his face. Austin stands there for quite some time, staring at that wide oak entrance door, rubbing his cheek as though it were touched with holy water. Doc? 3 hard, sharp knocks shattered the stillness of the makeshift infirmary, followed by the unmistakable throaty voice with its faint rural Georgia accent just outside the door. A new patient taking any visitors? Across the gray, cinder-block-lined room, Dr. Stevens and Alice glance at each other. They stand at a stainless steel basin, sterilizing instruments in a pail of scalding water, the steam drifting up across their taut expressions. Hold on a second, Stevens calls out, wiping his hands and going over to the door. Before opening the door, Stevens glances across the infirmary at the patient sitting up on the side of her gurney, her spindly, bandaged legs dangling. Christina, still in her robe, sips filtered water from a plastic cup, a woolen blanket pulled up across her midsection. Her swollen face, still beautiful even with her matted wheat straw hair pulled back into a knotted scrunchie, registers the tension. In that instant before the door opens, something unspoken passes between doctor and patient. Stevens nods and then opens the door. I understand we got a brave little lady in our midst, the visitor booms as he sweeps into the room like a force of nature. The governor's gaunt, coiled body is now clad in weekend warrior garb, a hunting vest, black turtleneck, and camo pants tucked into black combat boots, making him look like a degenerate third-world dictator. His shoulder-length onyx hair shines and bounces as he saunters into the room, his handlebar mustache curled around a smirk. Come to pay my respects. Gabe and Bruce enter on the governor's heels, the 2 men as dour and alert as Secret Service agents. There she is, Philip Blake says to the girl sitting on the gurney. He walks over to the bed, grabs a nearby metal folding chair, and slams it down backwards next to the bed. How you doing, little lady? Christina puts her water down, and then chastely pulls the blanket up over the top of her threadbare décolletage. Doing all right, I guess? Thanks to these folks? The governor plops down in the chair in front of her, resting his wiry arms on the seat back. His stare is the jovial gaze of an overzealous salesman. Doc Stevens and Alice here are the best. They surely are. Don't know what we'd do without them. Stevens speaks up from across the room. Christina, say hello to Philip Blake, also known as the governor. The doctor lets out a sigh and looks away, as though disgusted by this whole display of fake conviviality. "Philip, this is Christina." "Christina," the governor purrs, as though trying the name on for size. Now isn't that just the prettiest name ever?" A sudden and powerful tremor of apprehension trickles down the small of Christina's back. Something about this man's eyes, as deep-set and dark as a puma's, sets her immediately on edge. The governor doesn't take his glittering dark gaze off her as he speaks to the others. "You folks mind if the lady and I speak in private?" Christina wants to say something, wants to object, but the force of this man's personality is like a roaring river flowing through the room. Without a word, the others glance at each other, and then, sheepishly, one by one, they file out of the room. The last one out is Gabe, who pauses in the doorway. "I'll be right outside, boss," he says. And then, click. Chapter 7. "So, Christina, welcome to Woodbury." At first, the governor keeps his high-voltage smile trained on the injured woman. "Can I ask where you're from?" Christina takes a deep breath, looking down at her lap. For some inchoate reason, she feels compelled to keep the TV station she worked at a secret. Instead, she simply says, "Suburb of Atlanta. Got hit pretty bad. I'm from a little shithole town outside Savannah named Waynesboro." His grin widens. "Nothing fancy like them rich sections of hot Atlanta." She shrugs. "I sure as heck ain't rich." "Them places are all gone to hell now, ain't they? Biden's won that war." He aims that grin at her. "Unless you know something I don't." She stares at him, says nothing. The governor's smile fades. "Can I ask how you ended up in that chopper?" For a brief instant, she hesitates. "The pilot was a friend. Name's Mike." She swallows back her reticence. "Problem is, I promised him a Christian burial." She feels the heat of the governor's stare like a furnace. "You think I could possibly see to that?" The thin man scoots his chair closer to the bed. "I think we ought to be able to accommodate you in that department. That is, if you play ball." "If I what?" The governor shrugs. "Just answer a few questions, that's all." He pulls a pack of juicy fruit gum from his vest pocket, peels off a piece and pops it into his mouth. He offers her a piece. She declines. He puts the gum away and scoots the chair closer. "You see, Christina, the thing is, I have a responsibility to my people. There's a certain due diligence I gotta tend to." She looks at him. "I'll tell you anything you want to know." "Were you and the pilot alone? Or were there other people with you before you took off?" Again she swallows hard, girding herself. "We were holed up with a few people." "Where?" She shrugs. "You know, here and there." The governor smiles and shakes his head. "Now, see, Christina, that just won't do." He shoves the seat back against the gurney, close enough now for her to smell his scent. Cigarettes and chewing gum and something unidentifiable like spoiled meat. And he speaks softly now. "In a court of law, a good counselor might see his way to making an objection on the grounds that the witness is withholding information." "He's about to cross a boundary," a voice drones in Christina's head. "He's not to be trusted. He's capable of anything." In barely a whisper, she says, "I wasn't aware I was on trial here." The governor's lean, deeply lined face transforms, any trace of mirth going out of it. "You don't have to be scared of me." She looks at him. "I'm not scared of you." "The truth of the matter is, I don't want to force anybody to do anything they don't want to. Nobody has to get hurt." With the casual gesture of a man shooting his cuffs, he puts his gnarled hand on the edge of the bed, between her thighs, provocatively, not touching her, just resting it between her bandaged legs. His gaze doesn't waver. It stays locked onto her. It's just that I will do whatever it takes to make sure this community survives. You understand? She looks down at his hand, at the dirt under his nails. Yes. Why don't you go ahead and start talking, sweetheart, and I'll listen. Christina lets out an anguished breath, her posture changing. She stares into her lap. I worked at Channel 9, WROM, the Fox affiliate out of North Atlanta. I was a segment producer. Bake sales and lost pets and such. Worked in that big tower on Peachtree, the one with the helipad on the roof. Her breathing gets labored, the pain pressing down on her as she talks. When the turn happened, about 20 of us got trapped at the station. We lived off the food in the cafeteria on the 4th floor for a while. Then we started taking the traffic copter out on supply runs. She runs out of breath for a moment. The governor stares. They got any of them supplies left up there? Christina shakes her head. Nothing. No food, no power, nothing. When we ran out of food, people started turning on each other. She closes her eyes and tries to block out the memories that came flooding back like flash frames from a snuff film. The blood-spattered steam tables, and all the monitors filled with snow, and the severed head in the festering walk-in freezer, and the screams at night. Mike protected me, bless his heart. He was the traffic pilot. We worked together for years, and finally he and I, we managed to sneak up to the roof and steal away in Mike's traffic copter. We thought we were home free, but we didn't realize there was somebody in our group who was dead set on stopping anybody else from leaving. He sabotaged the helicopter's engine. We knew it immediately. Barely made it out of the city. Got maybe 50 miles or so. Before we saw the... She shakes her head forlornly and then looks up. Anyway, you know the rest. She tries to hide the fact that she's trembling. Her voice sharpens, turns rueful. I don't know what you want from me. You've been through a lot. The governor pats her bandaged thigh, his demeanor changing suddenly. He gives her a smile, pushes himself away from the bed, and rises to his feet. I'm sorry I had to go through that. These are tough times. But you're safe here. Safe? She can't turn off her simmering anger. Her eyes water with rage. The hard-bitten side of her comes out now, the veteran segment producer who doesn't take shit from anybody. Are you serious? I'm totally serious, sweetheart. We're building something good here, something solid. And we're always looking for good people to join us. I don't think so. She glowers at him. I think I'll take my chances out there with the biters. Now calm down, honey. I know you've been through the mill, but that's no reason to pass up something good. We're building a community here. Give me a break. She practically spits the words at him. I know all about you. All right. That's enough. He sounds like a teacher trying to calm an unruly student. Let's dial it back a little. Maybe you can fool some of these hayseeds with your little benevolent leader routine. He lunges at her and slaps her. A backhand across her bruised face, hard enough to whiplash her head against the wall. She gasps and blinks and swallows the pain. She rubs her face and finds enough breath to speak very softly and evenly. I've worked with men like you my entire career. You call yourself a governor? Really? You're just a schoolyard bully who's found a playground to rule. The doctor told me all about you. Standing over her, the governor nods and smiles coldly. His face hardens. His eyes narrow, the halogen light reflecting in his dark irises like two silver pinpricks. I tried, he murmurs, more to himself than to her. God knows I tried. He lunges at her again, this time going for her neck. She stiffens on the bed as he chokes her. She looks into his eyes. She calms down all of a sudden as he strangles her. Her body starts to spasm involuntarily against the gurney, making the casters squeak. But she feels no pain anymore. The blood drains from her face. She wants to die. The governor softly whispers, There we go. There. There. Gonna be all right. Her eyes roll back, showing the whites, as she turns livid in his grip. Her legs kick and twitch, knocking over the IV stand. The steel apparatus clatters to the floor, spilling glucose. In the silence that follows, the woman grows stone still, her eyes frozen in an empty, pale stare. Another moment passes, and then the governor lets go. Philip Blake steps back from the gurney on which the woman from Atlanta now lies dead, her arms and legs akimbo, dangling over the side of the bed. He catches his breath, inhaling and exhaling deeply, getting himself together. In some far-flung compartment of his brain, a faint voice objects and pushes back, but he stuffs it back down into that dark, fractured place in his mind. He mutters to himself, his voice barely audible to his own ears as though an argument is underway. Had to be done. I had no choice in the matter. No choice. Boss! The muffled sound of Gabe's voice on the other side of the door brings him back. Just a second, he calls out, the forceful tone of his voice returning. Just give me a second here. He swallows hard and goes over to the sink. He runs water, splashes his face, washes his hands, and dries himself on a damp towel. And just as he's about to turn away, he catches a glimpse of his own reflection in the surface of the stainless steel cabinet over the sink. His face, shimmering back at him in the liquid silver surface of the cabinet, looks almost ghostly, translucent, unborn. He turns away. Come on in, Gabe. The door clicks and the stocky, balding man peers inside the room. Everything okay? Gonna need a hand with something, the governor says, indicating the dead woman. This has to be done just right. Don't talk. Just listen. In a residential building next to the racetrack, on the second floor, in the dusty stillness, Dr. Stevens slouches drowsily with his lab coat unbuttoned, a Bon Appetit magazine tented over his poochy patrician belly, a half-empty bottle of contraband Pinot Noir on the crate next to him, when a knock at his door makes him jerk in his armchair. He gropes for his eyeglasses. Doc! The muffled voice outside his door gets him up and moving. Woozy from the wine and lack of sleep, he trundles across the nominal living room of his Spartan apartment, a warren of cardboard boxes and stacks of found reading material, dimly lit by kerosene lanterns. His place is an end-of-the-world refuge for a lifelong intellectual. For a while, Stevens followed sporadic dispatches on the plague coming out of the CDC in Washington, often arriving with survivor groups, published on quickie print-on-demand circulars. But now the data sits collecting dust on his windowsill, all but forgotten in the doctor's radioactive grief for his lost family. Need to have a little chat, the man in the hallway says when Stevens opens the door. The governor stands outside, in the darkness of the corridor, with Gabe and Bruce hovering on his flanks, assault rifles slung over their shoulders. The governor's dark, hirsute face is aglow with fake cheer. Don't bother with the cookies and milk, we won't be staying long. Stevens shrugs and leads the three men into the living room. Still woozy, the doctor motions at a ratty sofa stacked with newspapers. If you can find a place to sit in this pigsty, you're welcome to take a load off. We'll stand, the governor says flatly, looking around the hovel. Gabe and Bruce move around behind Stevens, predators circling for the kill. So, to what do I owe this unexpected, the doctor starts to say when the barrel of an APC pistol swings up and kisses the back of his skull. He realizes Gabe is pressing the muzzle of the semi-automatic against his neck cords, the mechanism cocked and ready to fire. You're a student of history, Doc. The governor circles, jackal-like. I'm sure you remember, back in the Cold War days when the Ruskies were still swinging their nuclear dicks at us, they had an expression. Mutually assured destruction. MAD, they called it. Stevens' heart races, his mouth drying. I'm aware of the expression. That's what we got going on here. The governor comes around in front of him. I'll go down and you go down with me, and vice versa. You following me? Stevens swallows. In all honesty, I have no inkling as to what you're talking about. This gal, Christina, she got the impression that I was a bad guy. The governor keeps circling. You don't have any idea where she would have gotten such an impression, do you? Stephen starts to say, Look, I don't shut the fuck up. The governor draws a black 9mm pistol, thumbs the hammer, and sticks the muzzle under the doctor's chin. You got blood on your hands, Doc. This girl's demise is on you. Demise? Stevens' head is upturned now from the pressure of the gun's barrel. What did you do? I did my duty. What did you do to her? The governor hisses at him through clenched teeth. I removed her from the equation. She was a security risk. You know why? Why does that? You know why she was a security risk, Doc? He increases the pressure on his chin. She was a security risk because of you. I don't know what you're talking about. You're a smart man, Doc. I think you know exactly what I'm talking about. He releases the pressure, pulls the gun back, and continues circling. Gabe, stand down. Let him be now. Gabe pulls his weapon away, stands back. The doctor lets out a thin breath, his hand shaking. He looks at the governor. What do you want, Philip? I want your loyalty, goddammit! The sudden roar of the governor's booming voice seems to change the air pressure in the room. The other three men stand deathly still. The doctor stares at the floor, fists clenched, heart thumping. The governor continues pacing around the doctor. You know what happens when you damage my image in this town? People get nervous, and when they get nervous, they get careless. The doctor keeps gazing at the floor. Philip, I don't know what this woman told you. Lives hang in the balance here, Doc, and you're fucking with that balance. What do you want me to say? I don't want you to say anything. I want you to listen for once. I want you to shut that smart-ass trap of yours and listen and think about something. The doctor emits a faint sigh of exasperation, but says nothing. I want you to consider what happened to this gal before you poison anyone else against me. The governor comes closer to him. I want you to focus your big brain on that. Can you do that for me? Whatever you want, Philip. And I want you to consider something else. I want you to consider how lucky you are. You got skills that keep you around. The doctor looks up at him. Meaning what? The governor bores his gaze into him. Let me put it this way. You better fucking pray we don't run across another doctor. You follow me? The doctor looks down. I follow you, Philip. You don't have to threaten me. Now the governor cocks his head at him and smiles. Doc. Come on, it's me. The old Fuller Brush salesman charm is back. Why would I threaten my old sawbones? He pats the doctor on the back. We're just a couple of neighbors flapping our jaws around the pickle barrel. Philip looks at his watch. In fact, we would love nothing more than to play a game of checkers with you, but we got... Out of nowhere, a sound outside cuts off his words and gets everybody's attention. Faint at first, carrying on the wind, the unmistakable crackle of .50 caliber gunfire comes from the east. The duration and fury of it, more than one gun placement barks for several moments, speaks to a serious firefight. Hold on. The governor raises his hand and cocks his head toward the window. It sounds as though it's coming from one northeast corner of the barricade, but at this distance, it's hard to tell for sure. Something major's going down, the governor says to Gabe. Both Gabe and Bruce swing their Bushmaster machine guns around in front of them, safety's going off. Come on! The governor charges out of the room, Gabe and Bruce on his heels. They burst out of Stevens' building with machine guns at the ready, the governor in the lead, his 9mm in hand locked and cocked. The wind skitters trash around their feet as they head east. The echoes of automatic gunfire have already faded on the breeze, but they can see a pair of tungsten searchlights about 300 yards away, the twin beams bouncing up across the silhouettes of rooftops. Bob! The governor sees the old medic huddled against a storefront half a block away. Shrouded in a ratty blanket, the drunkard crouches, shivering, his eyes popping wide toward the commotion. He looks as though the gunfire awakened him only moments ago, his expression bloodless and agitated, a man awakened from one nightmare by another. The governor hurries up to him. "You see anything, buddy? We under attack? What's going on?" The medic sputters for a moment, hacking and wheezing. "Don't know for sure. Heard a guy, he was coming from the wall just a second ago." He doubles over then with a coughing attack. "What did he say, Bob?" The governor touches the old man's shoulder, gives him a little shake. "He said, it's a new arrival. Something like that. New people." The governor lets out a breath of relief. "You sure now, Bob?" The old man nods. "Said something about new folks coming in with a pack of walkers right on their tail. They got 'em all, though. The walkers, that is." The governor pats the old man. "That's relief, Bob. You stay put while we check it out." "Yes, sir, I'll do that." The governor turns to his men, speaking under his breath now. "Until we get a handle on this situation, you boys keep them guns handy." "Will do, boss," Gabe says, lowering the Bushmaster's muzzle, but keeping the weapon cradled in his beefy arms. With his gloved hand, he releases the trigger pad, but keeps his index finger against the stock. Bruce does the same, sniffing nervously. The governor glances at his reflection in the hardware store window. He smooths his mustache, brushes a lock of raven black hair from his eyes, and mutters, "Come on, boys. Let's go roll out the welcome wagon." At first, standing in a halo of magnesium light and cloud of cordite, Martinez doesn't hear the heavy footsteps coming toward him from a dark stretch of adjacent street. He's too distracted by the mess that has tumbled into town in the newcomer's wake. "I'm taking them to the big man," Martinez says to Gus, who stands near a gap in the wall, holding an armful of confiscated weapons, a couple of riot batons, an axe, a pair of .45 caliber pistols, and some kind of fancy Japanese sword still in its ornate scabbard. The air smells of flesh rot and hot steel, and the night sky is clouded over. Behind Gus, in a haze of gun smoke, ragged bodies are visible on the ground outside the barricade and scattered across the pavement inside the gap. The freshly vanquished corpses steam in the night chill, their glistening black spores spattered across the pavers. "If I hear about a biter getting so much as 20 feet close to the wall," Martinez barks, making eye contact with every one of the 12 men who stand sheepishly around Gus, "you're gonna hear about it. Clean house!" Then Martinez turns to the newcomers. "You guys can follow me." The three strangers pause for a moment, leery and hesitant against the wall, 2 men and a woman, squinting in the tungsten radiance, their backs against the barricade like prisoners caught in mid-escape. Disarmed and disoriented, filthy from their hard travels, the men wear riot gear. The woman clad in a hooded garment that at first glance appears almost displaced in time, like a cloak from a monastery or some secret order. Martinez takes a step closer to the trio and starts to say something else, when the sound of a familiar voice rings out from behind him. "I can take it from here, Martinez." Martinez whirls to see the governor walking up, with Gabe and Bruce on his heels. As he approaches, the governor plays the role of town host to the hilt, looking all hail fellow well met, except for the clenching and unclenching of his fists. "I'd like to escort our guests myself." Martinez gives a nod, steps back, and says nothing. The governor pauses, gazing out at the gap left by the missing semi-trailer.